Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating journey. How a program shatters from a set of sequential CPU instructions into a massive parallel grid on a hardware accelerator. If you want to know exactly how a specialized piece of silicon chews through massive amounts of data in a fraction of the time it takes a standard processor, you are definitely in the right place. Let's get into it.
Here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the big picture of hardware trade-offs, then check out the anatomy of execution. From there, we'll zoom all the way down into the Fermi streaming multiprocessor and warps, explore the memory hierarchy that feeds the whole system, and wrap up with the programming models we use to control it.
Section 1. CPUs versus hardware accelerators. To really get GPUs, we have to start by understanding the fundamental design philosophy that separates a standard processor from a specialized accelerator.
When designing hardware, there's a fundamental spectrum of trade-offs. On one end, you've got the CPU. It's your Swiss Army knife, highly flexible, capable of running almost any task from booting your operating system to opening a web browser. But as we move across the spectrum, through GPUs, FPGAs, and all the way to application-specific integrated circuits, or ASICs, the hardware sacrifices that flexibility to perform very specific functions far more efficiently. You're basically trading general utility to get absolute dominance in a specific type of computation. It's the difference between a multi-tool and a surgical scalpel.
So how is that performance actually achieved under the hood? Well, CPU designers are obsessed with lowering the cycles per instruction, or CPI, on sequential tasks. They pack in massive branch predictors and deep, complex caches just to turbocharge a single line of instructions. It's kind of like having one genius mathematician solving a highly complex equation as fast as humanly possible. But GPU designers, they take a totally different route. Instead of agonizing over a single instruction speed, a GPU achieves its blistering efficiency by running thousands of operations at the exact same time. Think of it less like one genius and more like an army of elementary school students doing basic arithmetic simultaneously.
That brings us to Section 2, Anatomy of GPU Execution. How do we actually break software apart so that this hardware army can process it?
In standard programming, your sequential threads are living on the host CPU. The CPU acts as the boss, but when that boss hits a wall of highly parallel work, like rendering graphics, simulating fluid dynamics, or training an AI, it delegates the heavy lifting. It launches what we call a kernel. And a kernel is simply a parallel program designed to execute across a massive set of lightweight threads on the GPU simultaneously. The GPU workers just take over and churn through it. What's really cool here is how neatly our software abstractions map to the physical silicon. It's an elegant hierarchy. An individual software thread is handled by a single physical hardware core. Those threads are grouped together into thread blocks, which are physically executed by a larger hardware unit called a streaming multiprocessor, or SM. Zoom out one more time, and all those blocks combine into a massive kernel grid, which runs on the complete GPU unit. It descends perfectly from high-level code directly down to the metal.
All right, Section 3, Fermi SM and warps. We're going to zoom way in now and look specifically at the hardware where all this execution is scheduled.
32. Keep that number in the back of your head, because in the NVIDIA GPU architecture, 32 is the magic number. It's the exact number of threads that make up a vital hardware grouping known as a warp, and the warp dictates exactly how the GPU digests its workloads.
Threads inside a block aren't just chaotic individuals running random code, they are strictly bundled into these warps. Warp 0 gets threads 0 to 31, Warp 1 gets 32 to 63, and so on. But here's the kicker. The hardware selects these warps and forces all 32 threads in a single warp to execute the exact same instruction at the exact same time. Complete lockstep. Now this introduces a really fascinating challenge called thread divergence. Let's say your code has an if-else statement. If some threads need the if path and others need the else path, the warp physically cannot split up. So it has to run the if path sequentially while the other threads just sit there waiting, and then it flips. Avoiding that divergence is absolutely crucial for maintaining massive parallel performance.
Now we're inside the beast itself, the Fermi streaming multiprocessor. At the helm, you have the warp schedulers. They pick active warps and dispatch instructions into a massive array of CUDA cores. But the real game changer here is the gigantic register file holding 32,768 32-bit registers. Why so many? Because it enables zero overhead context switching. If one warp stalls out, maybe it's waiting for memory to load, the scheduler can instantly swap in another warp because all of its data is already sitting directly in those massive registers. No saving states, no restoring, no waiting. Just
instant swapping.
And it's not all just basic addition and subtraction inside that SM. You've got 16 dedicated load/store units computing source and destination memory addresses simultaneously for 16 threads every single clock cycle. Plus, you have 4 special function units, or SFUs. I like to think of these guys as the highly trained specialists called in for the heavy lifting. They strictly handle complex transcendental math, sines, cosines, reciprocals, square roots, you name it. By tossing the tough math to the SFUs, the standard cores don't get bogged down and keep flying through standard arithmetic.
This whole setup runs on the SIMT model, single instruction, multiple threads. Imagine a conductor leading an orchestra. Instead of every musician having their own independent sheet music and timing, the conductor broadcasts one single command to the entire warp. The instruction is shared, but the data is private. Multiple active threads receive the exact same instruction, but they apply it to their own separate pieces of data. By doing this, the chip doesn't need 32 separate instruction decoders. It just needs one. That frees up an enormous amount of silicon real estate to dedicate purely to raw computation.
Moving into Section 4, the GPU memory hierarchy. Because let's be real, all of that massive computational power is completely useless if you can't feed it data fast enough. A starving GPU is a slow GPU. So what is the actual physical journey of the data? It's a strict 4-step reality check. First, the CPU orchestrates everything and launches the kernels. Second, and this is usually our biggest bottleneck, the data has to be pushed from the system memory across the PCI Express bus to the GPU. It's slow and costly. Third, once the data is finally there, those lightweight threads chew through it in parallel blocks. And fourth, when the computation is done, the final results are shipped all the way back across that PCIe bus to the CPU.
Think of the memory layout like a highly optimized supply chain. At the very outer edge, you have the CPU-controlled system DRAM. It's like a massive warehouse across town. It holds everything, but getting a delivery takes forever. Move a bit closer and you hit the device DRAM holding the global memory right on the GPU card. Getting even closer to the compute cores, we hit the on-chip shared memory and caches. That's your fast local storeroom. And finally, right at the center, the per-thread registers. That's the tool belt you're wearing. Instant access, incredibly fast, but tiny capacity.
To squeeze every last drop of efficiency out of that supply chain, GPUs leverage specialized memory pools. Take texture memory. It's a read-only pool with dedicated hardware caching built specifically to render detailed 2D and 3D scenes efficiently. Then you have shared memory, which is critically important. It's a user-managed cache that acts almost like a local whiteboard, allowing threads inside the exact same block to collaborate and share data at blazing speeds. And don't forget constant memory, which is used to broadcast unchanging data to all threads simultaneously, saving just ridiculous amounts of bandwidth.
Okay, bringing it all home with Section 5, GPU programming models. With all this physical complexity, how do developers actually write code to interface with it?
When you look at programming models like OpenCL and CUDA, it's essentially a taxonomy translation exercise. They use different terminology to control the exact same physical silicon. For example, what OpenCL calls a compute unit, CUDA calls a streaming multiprocessor. What OpenCL defines as a workgroup, CUDA calls a thread block. Once developers understand this translation matrix, they can seamlessly map their logic to the hardware, regardless of the language or platform they choose. To tie it all together, the software abstractions we code in map flawlessly back to the tangible hardware of the CUDA device. Physical streaming multiprocessors step up to handle software thread blocks. Those blocks are logically sliced into warps, going all the way down to individual threads running in absolute lockstep on CUDA cores, all fed by that intricate, hierarchical memory supply chain we just walked through. It really is a masterpiece of engineering.
Which leaves us with a pretty wild final question to ponder. As our computational demands for massive AI models, fluid dynamics, and photorealistic simulations continue to explode, how will tomorrow's architectures evolve? How will chip designers continue to innovate that balance between the general-purpose flexibility of a CPU and the staggering parallel efficiency of a GPU? It's literally a hardware arms race right now, and understanding these fundamentals is exactly how you see where it's going next. Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and keep exploring.